I never signed up for this job, and this was just a very different situation than I think I could have ever imagined. But I think one of the ironies of life is that these things happen to you which you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy, and they end up being, you know, the way that you respond to those ends up really defining your life and who you are and what you're all about. And that's the first time I've ever heard that tape. And as you're listening to the tape, I'm thinking in my mind about all the things are rushing back to me about what was going on. And there were so many things going on that nobody even knows about and nobody ever heard of, and which I couldn't really share with anybody. And it was just amazing to, you know, it's amazing to me that I could actually get up there and do that. One of the things that doesn't come out in the case was that as we were sitting, you know, it talked about how we all came together in these command centers, and it was very much what we had learned to do during this planning process for the Millennium Bug, which everybody thought was going to be a big deal and ended up being nothing. But we had gone through this planning process and setting up command centers and doing all that. So that's why it was so natural for us to come into these command centers on our own. But I was sitting in the command center, and there was chaos, and people were yelling at each other and giving orders to each other, and people were coming in and out and telling us, you know, what we should be doing and what's wrong with this and that. And I can remember sitting there and saying, should I go home? My wife is like apoplectic, worried about where am I, why did you not call? Don't you know that you have a family, you have kids, you need to be back here with us? And I'm saying these people, you know, they're all just going crazy. And even though I'm the CEO of the Americas, I do have other peers in the company. So it wasn't necessarily my natural position to actually just kind of take control of the situation. But it was one of those times where I actually felt myself kind of go back, out. And I haven't had many of those experiences in my life. But I remember just saying to myself, God damn it, these people need help. They are looking for somebody to take control of the situation. And you can do it. They're counting on you. They need you to do this. And I don't know whatever happened in my life that kind of prepared me for doing that, but I did it. And I remember when it really hit me was when Kevin Cassidy, who came up, and just the description in the you know, doesn't really tell the whole story. The guy was covered in sweat. He was covered in dust. He had just witnessed people jumping to their death out of the World Trade Center, and he had just run all the way up from downtown. And he said, you know, chaos in the streets. There's public transportation is not running. Bridges and tunnels are closed. You got 2,000 people here. What are you going to do with them? And that's when it hit me. I got to do something here, you know. And that's when I said, well, first of all, if anybody wants to go home, they should go home. We're not going to hold people against their will. We got food in the cafeteria. Go down and make sure that they keep the food for meals, so we can serve as many meals as we can. They can open up the soda and everything else. Make sure that people know that they can stay here. And you've got to get back, because he used to work in the police department, I said, you've got to get back to your contacts and find out what are the facts about, can people go home or can they not? And they can stay here until they figure it all out. So I just think that those reactions, I don't know what it is about, you know, my past or that could ever prepare me for something like this. But I don't know, I'm just sharing with you, I guess, kind of what was going on inside me while all this other stuff that you read about was going on. And that wasn't there, but I was scared to death. I was scared to death. And then just something just happened that I just kind of went into a gear that I didn't know I had, and just kind of grabbed the reins. And I still don't know why I did it, but I did it. When I was coming back from, I was in the basement of the Four Seasons Hotel. I'm on the board of customer board of Compaq Computers, which is now HP. And so I had a bunch of actually customers of mine and I sitting around telling Compaq how they should run their business. And we got this message that that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. I had no idea, you know, how big a deal it was. I didn't know, you know, Rob and I were just talking, I didn't know from first reports whether it was, you know, a Piper or whatever the heck it was. So I pretty casually went and got my bag and went and I jumped in a cab. And the guy had 10-10 winds on, and very, you know, it was the fear that you could hear, the nervousness that you could hear in the reporter's voice. I could tell right away that it was no Piper Cub that had just crashed into the World Trade Center. And we were just stopped in traffic. We were going nowhere. And I was crawling out of my skin. And I had a suitcase in my briefcase. And I got out and I threw $5 at the guy and I just ran back to Times Square. And what was going through my mind was I was so frightened you can't believe it. As I got to Times Square, all the TV pictures were up, even including the ones in my building, and they were showing this raging fire. And I knew we had people down there. I knew we had customers down there. I knew people that worked down there. Then I saw, as I was coming up, I saw you know, a second plane hit, and I just got nervous because I had no idea where this was going to end. Right? At that point, nobody knew how big this was going to be. How many more planes are there? Where, you know, what are they doing? So I'd say fear was going through my mind, and how am I going to get back? Right? How am I going to get back to work? We didn't have a list of priorities before then, and Reuters has a value system that's really based on the history of the company being, you know, editorial. We were a 150-year-old news organization, so the things that are really at the core values of the company come from being trusted, accurate, being unbiased, factual. But those are the, you know, those were the things that have always been kind of the stated values of the company, and those are really important values. But this was a situation where you really had to understand what what were the unspoken values of the company. And I knew what the unspoken values in the company were. Anybody, you know, I just had my 15th anniversary at the company in April. So I've been with the company long enough to know that it really is a company with a soul. And it treats its employees really well. So I knew even before Tom told me, it's the people first. I worked with Tom. Tom used to be the CEO of the Americas before me. So I knew that was the answer I was going to get. And it just made sense, you know. We had all these people. You don't forget, I was in a room, and outside my room I had hundreds of employees out there crying because they knew people that were in the World Trade Center. They're looking at me saying, "Phil, where are they? Were they there? Are they okay?" And all of a sudden, you know, you don't know, right? And so you just, that was the thing that was first at hand. That was the issue that was right up here in front. How are people going to get home? Should they get out? Should they go out of the building? Are they going to be okay if they go out of the building? Who was down there? What were they doing? Have we heard from them? I mean, that issue was like right up in front. And I knew that it was of such magnitude that getting people back into business, well, yeah, we'll get to that, but not right this second. It's just a human reaction, I guess. And we really believe that if we focused on getting the people, actually getting rid of the people, getting them home, the ones that really couldn't be there for whatever reason. I mean, a lot of people couldn't be there for good, legitimate reasons, right? They had family that lived downtown. They had family that were in the building. They had friends, whatever. And we needed to make sure that they were taken care of, and that the people who could be there to help us do it were there, and that they were well taken care of, right? They didn't have to worry about other stuff. So that, you know, again, there's good business reasons behind a lot of this too, because you don't want a lot of people standing around, you know, crying about stuff that you have no control over, or hysterical, or just unable to cope with what was going on, which was really difficult to cope with. I mean, our building was brand new in Times Square. We had a direct shot straight down to the World Trade. You could see it, you know, and in the command center, we had flat panel screens all around the edge of it. We used it for customer demos, so each one was turned to a different channel, and we had our own feed because that's the business we're in. So it was all right in front of you. And that was the only call that you really could make. There were people who weren't there because they couldn't get back, and there were people who were there who really struggled, you know. I remember one guy was supposed to be speaking at the conference on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center, which is the where, you know, we had 300 people down there, and we got them all out alive and safe. The people who died, 2 of them from my group, and 2 from Radiance and 2 from Instinet, they were all at the same conference together at the Windows of the World on the 107th floor. And there was a conference on risk management, and one of my colleagues was going to give a speech on risk management. And for some reason he canceled, and he sent somebody else. And that other person died. And so he just couldn't deal with that. Which I don't know how I would have dealt with that. And so I don't think people ever held it against him. He just kind of disappeared. So you know, I don't think people. I mean, it just some people. It was. I keep thinking back to the, you know, the fight or flight feeling. You know, and I'm sure everybody went through it, and everybody made their own decision on it. And most of them made the decision to fight. Some of them made the decision to go. But you know, they had kids down there, you know, going to nursery. Some of my colleagues had kids in nursery school down there. It worked out. We didn't really hold it against them. I also tell you, I shouldn't let it pass without saying, you find out who your friends are in a hurry. And Rob, getting in a car and coming up to help us. You know, we had met. Reuters had worked with the University of Michigan on basically on leadership academies, and him coming down, we had meetings every day at about, what was it, about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock? Mm-hmm. We would gather the whole team. We would leave the command center, which we rarely did, and we would go into Tom Gloster's office that he kept on the same floor, and we would go in and we would just say, "How's everybody doing? What are you thinking about? What are you feeling? What are your people feeling? And is there anybody you're worried about?" And Rob would help these conversations, and it was great because it just, everybody at the end of the day, it wasn't the end of the day, it was really the middle of the day, but technically it was the end of the day. We'd get together and just deal with the emotional part, because you didn't have time to do, in that room, in that command center, you really didn't have time to deal with the emotions. You just had so much you had to get done. But when we got into these things, we had really open, honest conversations about what we were feeling, and about, you know, this you know, conflict between home and work and different priorities that we had. People that were really stressed out, and what we were going to do for them. It was a really important part. And again, it was really good business sense, because how else were we going to keep going through this whole thing without really dealing with the issues that everybody, you know, really had in their mind, to keep people fresh and in the game and able to actually function.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one of the things in here that I thought it was interesting. I had these meetings with the executive groups, but I also had open meetings with managers, and they came and talked about, much like you did, where were you, what did you do? And one of the things that came out was the difference between men and women on this issue of role conflict. Because the men, as you said, Phil, were there thinking, I've got to take care of the business and the people, but the women were in much more role conflict because they felt like they needed to get home and take care of their kids. And many of them had kids that were under daycare, or they had nannies at home, but I remember one woman saying she felt so guilty because the first thing she did was clear off her desk and walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, which was quite a considerable walk. But her mind was on completely getting home and checking her babies. And you know, I can't remember whether her husband or work, but she felt a lot of guilt over that. So I found that that role conflict, the difference between men and women, to be pretty interesting about you know, how people view that. You know, it's not just about 9/11, but the emotion that people in leadership and any managerial role takes is tremendous. And as a psychologist, sometimes it's hard to engage people because they think, well, I don't have time to deal with that. I've got to do the work. And I think Phil makes an important point about the work and the emotions are not separate. I mean, if you're a manager that thinks about it being separate, you're in deep trouble. So lately, what I've been doing in my work with executives and teams is talking about, I can go in and I could talk to them about stress management. I can't talk to them about emotion or psychology without getting some kind of a joke made. But if I said, well, I'm here to help you with stress management, or do you have any managers that are feeling a lot of stress and maybe should talk to somebody, inevitably they'll say, well, yeah, I have some. Let's start with me. But if I said, do you have any problems emotionally with what you're dealing with? Oh no, I'm fine emotionally. I just, so you almost have to. It's a language kind of thing, that the language of emotions is sort of verboten for managers. Whereas stress management, you can say, oh yeah, return on investment. If you get too stressed, you're going to miss work, and you'll die. So I find I have to really water down the message, at least until I build trust, and then it's a whole different story, of course, once trust is built and people start talking about what's really going on.
I started talking about what had to be done, especially focusing on these hundreds of people who had lined up out in front. And then I think we started taking out a whiteboard and started talking about the priorities. And there was a question here, how did you know who to rely on? I relied on the people who stood up and said, I'll take that one. So that's pretty much how it got doled out. Bridge is the company that we bought. Actually, we were in the process of buying them when this whole thing happened, and we actually closed a week after. And we got a huge amount of fixed income assets, analytical tools with that acquisition that's really helping us.
It's another piece about the compassion. I know that you talked a lot about that in here, that Bridge was purchased, and really you had no obligation to the people of Bridge, I think, but extended all the services that you were providing to the Reuters employees to the Bridge people, who were especially Bridge New York was totally devastated.
I mean, the company was bankrupt. We bought out of bankruptcy. We certainly could have said, oh, all bets are off. We're going to renegotiate the deal. And we thought about it. And we said, that's ridiculous. It just can't do that, right? I mean, it wouldn't have been in line with our values. So we just said, we're going to do the deal. We're going to do the deal at the price that we said we were going to do the deal. And we went and did it. When actually, there was no way that was worth exactly the same thing, right? They lost. They had a lot of assets in the World Trade Center. They had a data center. They had all stored much of their software, source code, in the World Trade Center. It was gone. A lot of stuff that we bought was gone. But we didn't change the price. We went ahead and did the deal. And I think that those employees are really committed to Reuters. I don't know, and then there's a question of, how do you prepare for something like that? If I was a CEO for longer, I probably would have known better who to ask to stay in the command center and who to ask to leave a lot earlier. But I don't think that there wasn't much that could prepare me for that. It's really, it's one of those moments that just kind of is thrust upon you, and you kind of go on instinct and do the best you can. I don't know that. Maybe I probably would have been a much more mature leader. I mean, I've learned so much as CEO, but it's a hard question to answer because I do feel like I'm a much better manager than I ever was before I was CEO, but a lot of it is because I've had to deal with a lot of things that came up from there, and the trust that employees had in me from then. My relationship with the employees, certainly a lot of it goes back to what happened there, so it's hard to tell.
Comment a little bit on the people side of this that we've touched on, but you know, the way that Reuters responded to the families I thought was just really extraordinary. Some people have mentioned the extending of the meeting at the airport and extending of the driver, but it's just hard to imagine. I don't know if I've ever actually been able to describe this. I actually was sending emails back to my friends when I was in New York and just trying to describe what was going on. I think actually I called Jane several mornings to say, Jane, what do I do here? You know, because it was all like building the bridge as you walk on it, and it's Bob's phrase. But I think that one of the early days that I was there, Monica and Phil had to deal with a family from the UK and you have to understand, people didn't know whether people had perished or not in the World Trade Center. I mean, if you recall, it was completely unknown for days whether people were in hospitals, had escaped and, you know, had gone, and it didn't really occur to people until, I'd say, 10 days afterwards that there was not any hope. Even when there was no hope to pull people out of the building, they still thought people might have been in wards someplace. So I remember you and Monica having to sit with a family who, there were several brothers and who had come over from the UK, and this was also like the biggest tragedy in the UK. They had lost more people than you know, hardly any other act of terrorism. Yeah. And I thought, my God, you know, I'd been a clinical psychologist for 25 years at that point, and I think once or twice in my career I had to sit with families who had lost a child, and that was probably the hardest work I'd ever had to do clinically. And here Phil and Monica are with this family who were just coming to the point of acknowledging that this, what was his name? I should say
Jeff Campbell.
Jeff Campbell was lost and probably would not be found. And they just did such a sensitive job of listening. And I remember asking you, how did you do that? You know, and I don't know if you remember what your answer was, but it was, I remember it very distinctly.
I probably said I have no idea.
No? You said, well, I just knew it wasn't about me. I mean, it was just about them, and I just, you know, removed myself from it, and I didn't think about what I was having to deal with, and it was just about them. And I think that that's, you know, to me that was, you know, the fact that today's emotional day to talk about it, it's kind of like, as a leader, that's what you're expected to do. Just put yourself out of the equation, deal with whatever comes up, and the load just, you know, just for most executives, it just builds and builds until it's pretty overwhelming. So, but I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, one of the scariest moments, I mean, the night before I didn't, you know, walk out. I remember I went out and called my wife from Times Square because I needed a break. I'd been making these phone calls, and people were, you know, people that I called were very upset on the other end of the phone because, you know, some of them, the people hadn't come home yet. One of them was kind of funny because I called and I asked for Mrs. So-and-so, and the guy said, sure, just a minute. Phil, why are you calling my wife? And I said, well, why the hell haven't you called in and said where you are? But I remember I spoke to, Jeff Campbell was difficult because we couldn't reach his family for several days. His mother was on vacation in the Canary Islands, and his father was hiking in the mountains in Wales. And but one woman I got hold of was Nellie Brzezinski, and I think she's mentioned in the story. And Nellie was a Russian immigrant who's just an incredible personality. But she was a single mother. She had emigrated from Russia with her son Alex Brzezinski when Alex was 13. And I talked to her that night, and I told her, actually Alex's girlfriend worked for us, and she was standing outside the command center just, you know, crying and saying, Alex is down there and I'm really worried about him. So I called Nellie, and she just, she didn't know what to think. But then the next morning, I was still there, and she came in. I got a call from security. Nellie Brzezinski is in the lobby. And I'm like, holy smokes, what am I going to tell this woman? What is she doing here? Why does she want to see me? And so we brought her up, and I brought her into Tom Gloss's office, which is a big office right outside of the command center. And, she was just hysterical. And I just remember, going back to it's all about them. All I could think of was, what can I tell this woman? And so I thought, there's nothing I can tell this woman. There's nothing that's going to make her feel any better or anything. So I just tried to ask her questions, and see if I could get her talking and find out what she wanted to talk about, what she wanted to do, what she wanted to go. And I built up an incredible relationship with this woman, and she still comes to my house. She always brings too many presents for Philip when she comes, but she told me unbelievable stories about emigrating from Russia with her son and basically smuggling them out of the country illegally, and with no work papers and stuff. And one of the good things that's come out of this is that we've really become kind of a Reuters family for Nellie Brzezinski. When we had that service, she said, Reuters is my family now. And that's one of the things I'm most proud about, is that Reuters, Tom just, I didn't have to ask him, should I do this, should I do that? It was whatever you can do, because he couldn't do anything for these people, right? So whatever you could do, the company was, just incredibly supportive. And I think the only reason it got around that I made the calls is because I did call people who ended up coming home, and they were very happy. But I think that was one of the things I was most proud of the company. And I think it relates to everybody, because every other employee, I knew from that day on that if anything ever happened to me at work, my family was going to be taken care of. And it gives you a different kind of relationship, especially now where you do lay off employees. You have a different kind of relationship with employees now. It's more of a relationship of convenience, I like to say, rather than a marriage. Because, on the average, people change jobs 8 times. But it's nice to know that you actually work for a company that if something ever happened to you, that they would take care of your family. And I think that gave me, an incredible feeling and loyalty to the company. But I think that permeates through the entire employee base. I don't think there's a lot of companies that are that compassionate. Sounds like you guys don't work for companies like that.